So a little while ago, I did a video about Ascension perks and specifically how they tier up amongst themselves. And of course, we had our S class, our A class, our B class, but sadly also a couple of D class ones, at least in my personal opinion. And there were a whole bunch of people out there that were saying, you know what, this D one, it's not really worth all that while, but you know, it could be a little bit higher. Now today, what we're going to be doing, we're going to take a look at those D class Ascension perks and see how we could potentially improve on them. These, of course, are the following. We got ourselves Eternal Vigilance, we got ourselves Executive Vigor, Imperial Prerogative, Shared Destiny, Transcendent Learning, Grasp the Void, finally, Enigmatic Engineering. Now, most of these are part of the vanilla game, just bar one. And overall, you know, they sound good on paper. Let's start off the top. Eternal Vigilance. So what does it do? It's a vanilla expansion one, vanilla version one. It's a star-based bonus modifier. It gives you a bonus to damage, hull, platform by 5%. It gives you additional defense platforms, and you can only unlock it once you get Star Fortress technology. Now, while all of this is nice, I personally don't feel that star bases and Star Fortresses are really all that good. Why would I invest money in platforms that I could potentially spend on something a little bit more flexible, like more battleships? Platforms for stations are relatively expensive, and when they engage the enemy, they are taken out relatively quickly, which is something I'm not a big fan of. I'd rather take the fight to the enemy, and maybe in a potential system that is in my favor, attack them in there or defend them in there. Of course, there are little outliners here like pulsar systems where you can just put plasmas on your stations, but that is a massive outlier and not always relevant to your game. Now, there is another thing that I have not so much of a problem with, a little bit more on the boring side of all things, really. I understand that Stellaris as a game is about modifiers. Every single thing you do adds modifiers. It's like plus minerals, X percentage, plus technology, X percentage, etc., etc., etc. However, Ascension perks are permanent bonuses that you attach to your empire for personalization and specialization. Therefore, I feel that the idea of adding bonus modifiers to your empire through Ascension perks is not necessarily all that good as a first step. So whilst I feel that the modifiers themselves can be applicable, they should not be the very first step in the process, and I'll tell you what I mean by that very shortly. Now, ironically, the first one that we have on our list here, Eternal Vigilance, does have all those modifier costs. However, basically what I would do with Eternal Vigilance, I would merge it with Grasp the Void, which will give you 5 additional Starbase cap, which is by itself pretty nice. Reduce the cost of Starbase upgrade fees, because that is always really nice as well. Starbases can be really expensive, especially in the later stages of the game where you want to start building citadels. And on top of that, I would remove the requirement for fortresses. And that way you can get Eternal Vigilance relatively early in a stage where it still matters to get stations, because in the early game, the AI can still really pose a threat, and especially if you're playing really, really wide, you will need those stations. So having the merger with Grasp the Void makes perfect sense to me. And in that way, Eternal Vigilance would be a far more interesting setup here. I don't need those bonuses to damage hull and platform, because, to be honest, you can get those through the repeatable technologies in the late game. And anything that you can get repeatables for, I feel has no place as an Ascension perk. So yeah, if you feel that you disagree with this, of course, there's always the comment section below. Executive Vigor. So Executive Vigor is really interesting in my personal opinion. First of all, a +2 edict capacity, whilst nice, is not something that you can get through other ways. You can get it through civics. You can get it through authorities. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the way the authorities are set up right now. I feel that they could have been a little bit more flexible. And that is pretty much it. +2 edict capacity, you can get a bunch of bonuses out of it. But again, you can get those bonuses potentially through late game repeatable technology. Sure, it doesn't really apply to the consumer goods or the alloys one. But to be fair, if you have a large enough and optimized economy, you don't need any of those bonuses. All you need then is the technology bonus, and that's pretty much it when it comes to your edicts. Now, what would I do here? And this is pretty interesting, because Executive Vigor, in my personal opinion, would give you a +1 civic slot. Yeah, that's right. And +1 civic slot. And that right there is a huge deal, because having the ability to add additional civics to your empire can be a massive impact on the way you play your game. Now, I would gate this behind Galactic Administration, because it already unlocks yourselves a additional civic slot. Plus, you know, at that point, you have 2 additional civics that you can apply to your empire, and Executive Vigor would instantly rise up to that S tier just because of how good civics are. Edicts by themselves, that's fine, but civics, on the other hand, are massive bonuses that are effectively permanent and can give all sorts of amazing modifiers. In addition, you could even go even further and say, look, Executive Vigor unlocks additional civics that you can't unlock in any other way. Similar to how Ecumenopole, you know, the planets that are cities, can be unlocked through Ascension perks. So anything that involves getting additional things that you can't get in any other way possible, say new civics that are locked behind Executive Vigor, would be really cool. Let's say 3 or 4 different ones, depending on the type of empire that you play, and you can pick one of those to see which one is relevant to your situation. And Executive Vigor would really tie into that really well, because the focus on the way you run your executive department could really tie into additional civics that you could work with. So yeah, that's one approach here. 1+1 or +2 edict capacity really does not cut it for me. I'd rather have more civics. Civics are cool. Civics are fun. Then I get to Imperial Prerogative. Now, Imperial Prerogative, I feel, has been kind of left by the wayside as of some of the more recent expansions, and that has mostly to do with the administrative capacity bonus that you get through it. Again, this is a modifier bonus of 20% admin cap. That is completely useless in the early game, because the 20% bonus on 50% is 10. Yeah, it's 10 points of admin cap. So this would become something that you would use in the late game, but by that point, you're already using your Ascension slots on something a lot more useful, like, I don't know, Colossi, or Giga Structures, Mega Structures, or Galactic Wonders, and stuff like that, Master Builders. Why would you get an additional 20% admin cap when you can get something that will boost your economy up into the heavens? Yeah, that's something you need to just think about, because plus 20% admin cap is just not interesting. And again, it's a modifier, something you can get through other things. And on top of that, the admin buildings by themselves make them completely useless, because you could just build an admin building and boom, you've got new additional empire capacity. So what would I do here? Unlock special admin districts that you can get through your decisions on planet. You can lock them by Ecumenopole. They could synergize in some sort of way, or at least get a bonus version of it. Say you want to have a planet and you don't want to spend all of those planetary building slots on, say, admin buildings, but you still want to have a planet of bureaucrats. Make them districts with specialists. A specialized planet with these districts would be a very interesting approach. And again, it would lock a interesting mechanic behind an Ascension perk, forcing you to, well, not so much forcing you, but giving you the option to specialize your empire. And in addition, you can even give some additional bonuses to those administrators, or at least those bureaucrats, to see what they could do. Give them a bonus of additional tech output, or unity, or something along those lines. That would put the Executive Vigor straight my apologies, Imperial Prerogative straight up into, again, the S class, and would make them so much more interesting. Then we get to Shared Destiny. Now, Shared Destiny, I always thought was fascinating, but especially when the game first came out, and Shared Destiny has been with us for quite some time. But am I a fan of it? No, absolutely not. A minus 50% subject integration cost and plus 100% subject trust cap. I don't really care all that much about my subjects to pick Shared Destiny, especially when there is better options available. Instead, however, Shared Destiny could be something a lot more interesting, because you're not going to be busy integrating other empires. You're going to need to go through the AI and completely reset their entire planetary setups and lock them behind The particular, what am I looking for here? It's a system I don't use all. Sectors, that's the one. Thank you. But yeah, sectors and stuff like that, and just make sure that they deal with themselves. Having the addition of additional planets from the AI could cause serious problems, mainly in like the admin cap department, etc. So what would I do here? Shared Destiny adds additional vassal types. Similar to, say, Satrapy or some of the Fallen Empire ones, they are rather interesting, and having the ability to get different types of vassals or tributaries or whatever you would want to call them at that point in time will really allow you to specialize what kind of subject empires you could get. Say, hey, this empire over here, they are specialized in this kind of stuff. That means that they will output resource X and Y quite efficiently. So let's turn them into a satrapy, give them more energy, give you more minerals. Rather than the integration process, make them more cater to you, what kind of resources you can get out of it. And satrapy also gives you fleet cap, which by itself is really, really interesting because now you're kind of focused on building anchorages or the joys of, say, fortress worlds and stuff like that, or even some technologies. So yeah, once again, having special options that allow you to specialize your empire and really bring your vassals into the fold and making them more interesting. That'd be really cool. And I think that would be a much more interesting approach to shared destiny. Transcendent learning. So transcendent learning, what does it do? It gives you +2 leader cap. Okay, that's nice. I guess it's a nice bonus for your sectors, which by itself is nice. And on top of that, it gives you +50% leader experience gain. Now, +50% leader experience gain, if your leaders are living really long or they are immortal, say you're a machine empire, leader experience gain doesn't really do all that much because you're going to eventually get to that point anyway. Plus, you can hire leaders from, say, your enclaves or from other empires that are out there. So what could you do with this? Transcendent learning. Well, I kind of want to loop back onto the whole executive figure thing where I kind of mentioned add additional civics that are locked behind an Ascension perk. Do the same thing here. Transcendent learning. Have your leaders have the opportunity to get leadership traits that are not available to any other empire unless they have transcendent learning. Transcendent learning, it implies that they've learned skills that are not really been able to be taught somewhere else. They've transcended. So add new leader skills that can be there. Have them with special traits for admirals, special traits for scientists, special traits for your governors, and they can have additional bonuses on top of them. And depending on how those modifiers would work, yes, modifiers, I did say that I didn't like them, but this is gated behind something else, getting additional bonuses, would really cause this to go up into S tier immediately, and that would make your choices so much more impactful. Because now you're like, okay, I can go for a ability to get a little bit more tech, like with some of the more S-class ones. Or I could get better leaders and roll better leader skills that may give me better science output, better resource output, etc., etc. That would be really, really good. Let's say, for instance, you have a governor that is specialized in strategic resource output. So all of a sudden you can crank out crystals, motes, and gases at an increased rate. Unlocking that behind transcendent learning would be a massive, massive deal. Then there's Grasp the Void, +5 starbase capacity. We already talked about that. We're merging that with the Eternal Vigilance. Finally, there's Enigmatic Engineering. Now, Enigmatic Engineering, what does it do? +2 sensor range, +4 even, my apologies. Hyperlane detection range. What that means is that you can detect enemy fleets when they're inbound to you. And on top of that, if you destroy an enemy fleet, or at least an enemy fleet destroys you, you won't leave any debris for them to scan. Now, that last one is mostly applicable in MP, I feel. The first two are okay. +2 sensor range and +4 hyperlane detection range is good as well, but not to the point that you would build an Ascension perk around it. This is something that you would gate behind technology. Instead, why not build an entire event chain around this? You unlock enigmatic engineering. What does it take you? It can take you on a wild goose chase around the galaxy to get those enigmatic technologies similar to the enigmatic fortress. The enigmatic fortress has been gutted over the last few years anyway, and the bonuses that you can get out of enigmatic fortress are not nearly as good as they used to be. Enigmatic reactor, enigmatic shields, locking behind enigmatic engineering, especially in the early game. Well, of course, you would need to move enigmatic engineering to pretty late in the game or make an extremely long event chain. Would really make things so interesting, especially if it's branched off in multiple directions where you can find certain technologies based on the decisions that you make. Would make things so much more interesting. And the idea of having an event chain, a large event chain, locked behind an Ascension perk would be awesome. Say, hey, we've gotten this Ascension perk, we've did some research, we unlocked a technology which leads into a special project, which leads into an event chain, which leads into a couple of archaeological sites, which potentially can get into a relic, which then goes to more events, etc, etc, etc. And that way it would feel very much like the Worm in Waiting, one of the more popular expansions that is available. And that one's free, of course, as well, so that may have something to do with it. But it's got the meme status, so why not try to cash in on that and get something similar going for enigmatic engineering? Plus, it's locked behind Apocalypse, so having more interesting stuff for an expansion would be awesome. Now, obviously, these are just ideas. These are just ways of improving what I'm referring to as these D-Tier Ascension perks. And I feel that with all of this combined, you would have something that is really cool and would really force you to choose between the already A and S tier Ascensions on top of these ones. So your choices would have more impact, and choices should have impact on your game. This should not be a single meta of every single time I need this Ascension in every single time, because that's the kind of rut that I am in, which I'm not particularly a fan of. New flavor, new stuff behind Ascension perks, make them special, have them specialize your empire rather than just adding flat modifiers. Flat modifiers are just boring. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this and that you have some ideas of your own. Feel free to leave them down in the comments below. If you didn't like it, dislike button's over there, but liking is also cool as always. But yeah, and I want to thank my patrons as well for making this video possible. We're going to go and wrap up this video here. If you haven't watched the Ascension tier list, there's a video in front of you right now, and of course a couple of playlists for you to enjoy as well, with more Stellaris content in the near future. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take good care of yourselves, and as always, improve those Ascension perks.